This is a thing called I'm Going Home by helicopter.
Well, we didn't go home by helicopter. That was a lie because they stopped running. The minute it gets dark, they don't run, and you wouldn't see anything. Going in, you know that if you imagine those helicopters in Apocalypse Now, with the big door open where they have the machine gunner. Well, they had I guess they call him a dispatcher that was hanging out, leaning out over the thing, and I had a movie camera, and he took some film hanging out of the chopper. I was sat in the seat, but I could see it was just a sea of bodies, basically, you know, as you flew in. And parked cars. Lots of people abandoned the cars because they wouldn't go. They would, you know, you got so far and then you had to walk. Yeah. They expected 150,000 maximum, and they got. Some people say 500,000, 400,000. You know, however many.
When you played, was that after or before the big rainstorm?
We were about to go on, and it started to rain. Not our fault, of course. That was nature, and. It went on then for maybe 4 hours, and then just before we went to go on, Country Joe rushed on, a managerial coup, I think, and they went on straight after the rain, which meant we had to wait yet another hour. So, but the residue of the rain was still there when we went on. The stage was flooded. There were cables across the stage, and in between the cables, it was little rivers of water.
Yeah. Sounds dangerous.
It was very dangerous. I mean, the whole thing was dangerous. That they'd had a mudslide. The stage was a makeshift stage, and either side of the stage they built what you would call viewing platforms for VIPs, press, etc., etc. And the weight of the stage was forcing the stage was slowly sliding down the hill. I think it had moved about a foot. So they tried to limit the people on the stage. And then, of course, there were the towers that were a little precarious. It was hair-raising. I mean, it was a wonderful event from the point of view of that many people with similar ideals got together, and contrary to the uptightness of the people that supported the Vietnam War and all those things. So it was a success in that, but a disaster too in the term of statistic disaster.
A small wonder they fulfilled the program and everything happened.
It's a surprise that it actually went through. I mean, you probably know, and you can read it if you didn't, that it wasn't even at Woodstock. It was scheduled to be at Woodstock, and at the last minute, the local authorities wouldn't grant the license, so they moved it to Bethel, which was 41 miles away from Woodstock, in the Catskill Mountains, the acidic Alps, you know. That's which if you've seen Dirty Dancing or that, you know, the acidic Alps are where Jewish people from New York used to go to the summer camps, and all of a sudden 500,000 strange people descended on their traditional holidaying place. That must have been really weird for them too.
Yeah. Were you nervous before going on stage and doing your gig?
No, I wasn't nervous. I was pissed off. I was hungry. Yeah. And I went down. We flew from St. Louis, Missouri the night before. We were playing. We'd done the Newport Jazz Festival, I think July the 4th. We were on a 7-week American tour, our 4th tour, and we'd gone on tour to do a few selected dates with Newport Jazz, and there was St. Louis. So we did the St. Louis show and flew up to LaGuardia, I think, and then drove up to Liberty, which is where the Holiday Inn was. Up early, nothing to eat, get to the Holiday Inn, there's no room at the inn, and there's no food at the inn, but there's a whole load of people there, all, you know, Hendrix and Joplin and Sly Stone, and everyone's kind of hanging out there waiting to go. So I thought I'll get something to eat down at the venue. So hitched a ride on the first helicopter going down, and that's when I ran into Pete Townsend, who said, "Don't eat or drink anything that's not. Don't drink anything that's not out of a can, not a sealed can, and don't eat anything because it's all spiked with acid." Okay. So that was the food thing out. Yeah. Joe Cocker flew in. I watched Joe Cocker's show, and I think he then took off in a helicopter. And by the time I wondered what was happening, it started to rain. We were due to go on straight after Joe. So I spent, I think, 6 hours in the back of a U-Haul truck, watching the rain coming down.
I guess you got paid, but now you're mentioning Pete Townshend. I heard the story about the Who denying to go on until they actually saw cash.
Maybe so. I mean, it was a gladiatorial fight between the managers back at the Liberty, who was getting paid, who was going on, what order they were going on, etc., etc. I honestly don't know. I didn't see any money. I've read, as you probably have, that we allegedly got about $3,500. But I mean, when we toured in those days, you went out, you did a tour, they gave you, here's $20, go and enjoy yourself. And at the end of the tour, they did the accounts. And then they gave you some money. And you could never tie it down to what show, or whether it was even the right amount of money.
So you might have got paid for playing at Woodstock.
Well, I think our former manager is a multi-millionaire, if not a billionaire. And I'm not a multi-millionaire, so I guess somebody got paid. Yeah. I asked Michael Lang, I had dinner with him last year, who reputedly was driving around the ticket outlets on a motorcycle picking up the cash. And I said, "Did you get paid, Michael?" And he said, "Well, no. Oh, I don't know whether that's true. I suspect it probably wasn't true. But I'm sure that the people that made the film made a lot of money out of it. And there were several labels that put out the soundtrack. They must have made a lot of money. And I can tell you, I've had, in 50 years, $5,000 in royalties from the record and the movies. And when you think that the film's on, or was, and I'm sure it will be even more, this 50, but you could see it, every country you went to, it was always on. The movie, they were reshowing the movie, the documentaries, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the plus side of it is that it sustained a career for a lot of people. It started a career for some, jump-started a career for others, and certainly for 10 years after, it sustained a career. And you can't put a price on that.
Because as far as I remember, having read, because I was too young at that time, but around 69, when you were coming to Denmark, you were playing around 3 or 4 gigs a weekend, and then back again, Brønshøj Pop Club, and
yes,
you were not, on the big stages before Woodstock, at least not in Europe.
I think in Denmark we'd play, say, in Copenhagen, the Falconer Centre, which would be 1,000 people, maybe 1,500 people, I don't know. So yeah, a couple of thousand people a night. In America, before Woodstock, we were doing sometimes 3,000, 5,000 people a night. We had a minor success with an album chart in America, and we were breaking through, and that was doing really well. But after Woodstock, and as you said, it wasn't after the Woodstock, but it was after the movie came out.
Sure. 1 year after.
Yeah, that
1 year later.
We went from playing to 3,000 to 5,000 to 20,000 to 50,000 people a night. And quite honestly, it freaked Alvin out. He found that very disturbing. And in some ways it was fun. And if you don't take yourself too serious, it was great. But you would go on stage, and bearing in mind that there wasn't the monitoring or the PAs that they have now. You could go on stage and you wouldn't be able to hear a thing for the crowd shouting. And before you started, that was as loud as they were going to get the entire night. So we were used to, playing to seated audience that dug the blues, not screaming fans. So it did change, and the movie changed the face of the music business. All of a sudden, it became big business. I mean, most of those, there were a few what you might call pop bands that played Woodstock. I guess you could say that the Who, in a way, were the first wave of Britpop bands that came over. Hendrix was black, so he wasn't really mainstream America at the time. Jefferson Airplane, maybe. There were one or two, but like Santana and Mountain and all that. We were all underground, what they used to call underground.
But still, Hendrix, I think he scored the highest amount of money. He was topping the bill.
So they say, and I, if you ask Jimmy, he would say, I don't know whether I got it or not. No,
and he played Monday morning.
To be perfectly honest, I can't speak for Jimmy, but I wasn't into the money. I was just a guy that, hit 4 pieces of wire nailed to a plank of wood that was travelling around, leading a rock and roll lifestyle. I mean, it was brilliant. It was exciting.
The gig in itself at the Woodstock stage, from the movie and from the album, we know only Going Home. What else did you play?
We played, and I can tell you because I've heard some smatterings of tape. They've discovered some tape, but they're pretty deteriorated in a way. Whether they'll actually surface, I don't know. I think the label would like to put them out. I'm not sure whether I personally would want them, but I don't have any say in that. We did 4 or 5 songs. We did Spoonful, we did Help Me, we did Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, I Can't Carring for Sometimes, and I'm Going Home as an encore. And at one stage during the set, and I'm not quite sure where, we did the drum solo because because of the rain and the wet, the guitars kept going out of tune. We had to stop and keep tuning up, which was really frustrating. I mean, there weren't guitar tuners in those. We tune up to a tuning fork or a piano note, and on a stage like that, trying to tune up, it's not as easy as just flicking it around a strobe tuner. And then when we finished, I think we finished with I Can't Keep From Crying Sometimes, and I'm Going Home was the encore. So in between coming off from I Can't Keep From Crying and going back on for the encore, Alvin broke a string, and so I think it's Bill Graham, I've seen the movie for a long time. So 10 years after, and we're supposed to come back on, and I think you can then edit about 7 minutes where people are saying, Alvin's broken a string, he's going to change the string, talk to the audience. So I don't know what I said. I probably said something like, oh my God, I'm shitting myself, what do I say? You know,
like Crosby, Stills and Nash, you always say, we're scared.
Good time. Anybody wet? Has anybody taken any of the acid? You know.
How was the audience response to you? Because I mean, there's 500,000 people, and if you're in the back, you can hear 10 years after on stage, but not see it.
Because PA companies, that was the first time they used delay towers. You know, you understand delay towers. Bill Hanley had this whole idea of setting up these delay towers, so where in theory you would get an even sound wherever you were. But I think, you know, people go to that. It was an expression of solidarity about wanting peace, love, wanting to change the world, anti-Vietnam War, uptight parents, love. So the people were there for the event as much as the music. So maybe the first 10, 20, 30, 40,000 were there at the front looking at the music, and everyone else was doing their own thing, rolling in mud or whatever. So that, I doubt if you were at the very back, you wouldn't see much. I mean, there were no
big screens.
No big screens. No.
And hardly, I wouldn't say nobody, I guess, but a lot of people wouldn't have known about 10 years after before.
No, I don't think they would. I mean, some did, obviously, because we were quite popular, as I say, 3 to 5,000, 2 to 5,000, sometimes a little smaller. So there was a thing, and I think we'd been in the top. Our albums had been in the top 20, but it's very regional. Your success in America, and you can be huge in Texas. You can be a huge artist in Texas, and nobody's heard of you anywhere else. Yeah. And I know a lot of people that are huge in Texas and don't give 2 shits about being big anywhere else because they're quite happy. So we were big. We were a big band in New York City. That was the first place we broke into. San Francisco, just trying to think, Boston, Philadelphia, and then it took us a while to break through to the West Coast. And of course, when the movie came out, that's what broke us. So you could say that after that, anywhere, pick a town that you've never heard of, anywhere in America, that's got a school or a university hall that holds 10,000 people, and you could put 10 Years After in there any day of the week, a midweek, and it would sell out. And that's what the movie did.
Did you have the chance to see other bands while you were there, or you got away after?
I saw whilst we were there was Joe Cocker, a little bit of Country Joe and the Fish. But having said that, I'd seen all the bands anyway. I'd worked with all of them. I mean, every single one, apart from Joan Baez, I think. And I probably have worked with Joan Baez, but I can't remember. But all the others I knew, yeah. And most of them I knew personally, yeah.
And where you told me you were hanging out with Sly and the Family Stone and all the others before you got there. How was the mood in between people there? What were you talking about?
Well, not so much about music. I mean, there was a lot of people took a lot of acid, involuntarily too, you know, so it was all a little weird. People wanted to get on. I mean, you've seen the Jimi Hendrix thing where he goes on at, I don't know what time, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning.
Monday morning, yeah.
But they were running till 5 and 6 in the morning, even the nights before that. It was just crazy. I mean, if I were there for the weekend and I got there, let's say, midday, ready for a 2 o'clock start, and the first night went through to 6 or 7 in the morning, and then it started again and again and again, you could forgive people thinking, actually, I'm not going to go near the stage today. I'm going to, you know, try and go into Bethel and see if I can get a cup of tea.
This acid thing, were there any, I mean, it's tricky stuff. Were there any casualties, someone who freaked out?
There were a lot, yeah.
Because there were warning against the brown acid as it is.
There were a lot of people freaked out, and they set up a special thing. I forget the organisation that did it, but they had people to try and help. Yeah. Yes.
But your drinks, or no, you didn't get anything to drink or eat. You weren't spiked.
No, I wasn't. I mean, I have never taken acid for my own personal reasons. But even if I had taken acid before, I really would not want to take it involuntarily and to have a job to do. I mean, you know, I think Pete said, "Yeah, I got spiked last night, and I didn't even know who I was here with." You know, it's not a good thing. I'd met so many people. The Vietnam War was on. I met so many soldiers coming back from the Vietnam War, and they were taking acid, and they were completely messed up. I mean, the war itself would mess you up, but.
So it's a wonder it was so peaceful.
And it must have disappointed the Republicans. It must have, because I heard at one stage that Nixon or the local governor wanted to send in the National Guard. They hoped, they really wanted, because it was a solidarity against that war. Really, I'm not political myself, but. There was some very strong feelings about that war, and they really wanted to. And the country was polarised, and the people, the hippie thing, which it went on from the what are they called, the Beat generation, Ginsberg and all that. But the hippie movement was as I say, it had its own music, its own ideals, and this and the other, and we wanted to change the world. And a lot of people were frightened of that, afraid of it.
Yeah. When the album came out and the film, and you saw and could listen to yourself, the quality of the recording and how you played, what did you say? Yes, we are that good that you can. You don't say broadcast, but send it out on a film and album.
Not particularly. I thought it was okay. But, you sign with a record company, and the record company in those days had a right to put out whatever. They owned it. They owned your tapes. So they could do whatever they wanted. I mean, I thought it was a good, I thought it was a good promotion.
Sure.
And, everyone's telling you, yeah, you were great, it was fantastic, we loved it. So I was pleased. We were lucky to have done it. A lot of people didn't want to go, including people in my, in 10 years after, they really didn't want to go. It was just another festival that nobody knew anything about, and we'd done so many of them. But this one, because of the amount of people that went there and the fact that it was filmed, made it something special. And it became a beacon of light, really, to all those Eastern Bloc countries where people didn't have that freedom of speech, would get arrested listening to pop music. I mean, subsequently, years later, when I toured some of those countries, people were in tears, saying, "Wow, I saw the movie," so yeah, it was an important thing.
At the time, you couldn't have avoided seeing the cameras, but recording of the sound. Are you aware of how that it went on? That everything was recorded? We were told it was being filmed, but I didn't know what they were filming. I think for myself, if someone says we're filming tonight, if they were doing it now, I would say okay, fine, but I'd like to see it before. You release it. Those days they're filming it. Oh, fine, okay. Some people weren't that. Some people refused. They said, "I am not going to," because you had to sign a release. "I'm not going to do it unless you pay me." But I mean, the conditions for the sound recording, just to take that. I once met and interviewed Eddie Kramer, who was sitting in a truck far behind. I don't know how far behind the stage it was, but it was some way behind the stage. And, there were no cameras, he told me. No. They had people running up and down and saying, "Now you have to press the red button because they are going on in a second."
Well, yes.
So they were sitting with their backs to the what happened.
They were recording on 8-track tape, and they had 2 tape machines, but one broke down. So, you've got a 30-minute best reel of tape, and you've got to keep doing those tape changes. So they were having a few problems. I've done a few live recordings myself. There's always you need someone actually on that stage and communication to be able to.
I don't know if you're doing now. You're in Denmark with a trio playing small places. Yeah. So I guess you're not really doing festivals anymore. I don't know if you're attending them.
Yes, we are. But this is the first time I've been to Denmark. I can't remember the last time I came here, and I got invited to do that thing last night, and I said to the agent, "Well, yeah, I'll do that if you put a couple of shows in for my own band." And that's what he's done. But getting a show on a Saturday, on a Sunday, and a Monday, of course, is quite. So we're playing a small place, which is sold out. But
sure, because now it's 50 years ago, and there will be more Woodstock tribute concerts. A lot. But
we're doing 20.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're thinking on festivals today, will there be anything like the same spirit that there was in Woodstock 50 years ago? It's much more organized, but the spirit.
I don't think there will. I think people now are so diverse. I don't think there's that much of a unity like there was then. Or young people having very similar ideals. You dressed. There was a way of dressing. You had ideals. You listened to the music. You were into all the things. Different philosophies, different religions. Now, I'd see a lot of young people now, and they just drive down the road in the cars going boom, 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 boom. To me, it doesn't really give much of a message about saving the world. It's so no, I don't think so. And I think you organise a festival now to make money.
But here
they hope to make money.
Sure,
it's specifically to make money. It's sponsorship
But here in Denmark, there's the big Roskilde Festival. I guess it has up to 10 stages. But at Woodstock, there was one stage, in the beginning of Roskilde, there was one stage, and we were all unified to see the same thing. The whole weekend.
I think I played Roskilde at least once, maybe a couple of times, and I know. There weren't that many stages when I played it. We played the main stage, but I believe there was another tent where they had they used to do a jam.
First there was the big stage, then there was a folk tent, and then there was a jazz tent, and from there it expanded. And I was hitchhiking from the other part of Denmark first time I was at Roskilde in '72. Now I see the parents that drive their children through there, and they even provide beer for them so they don't get dry during.
I mean, festivals now are an event. You don't go to protest. You go to have fun at a weekend. I mean, this Woodstock thing now. I was reading today. They're talking about having glamping tents, and and a lot of the people that were there are writing and saying, "Well, we want seats." I don't want to be. I've played Woodstock, the Woodstock-festival now 3 times. I think the 25-year and 40-year, and. It's changed. The last time I played it, it was in an amphitheatre, like an open shed, so you can seat 5,000 or 10,000, I don't know how many. Then it opens up into a natural hillside. It wasn't just a hillside and with a tent at the stage at the bottom.
We can say it all came from Woodstock, the idea. Last question. I remember seeing you in the film, Woodstock-film. I've seen you in Copenhagen, in the beginning of the 70s, and in all quite big venues. You were the one, apart from Alvin Lee, that we were looking at because you were very active, or you were freaking out on stage. Yeah. You're going to play in half an hour here. Are you still, do you stand quite still now, or are you freaking out?
You have to have a look. You have to wait and see. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't think I stand still. I don't run as fast as I used to, but I don't stand still. Yeah.
But you were, I remember, quite spectacular.
Well, I'm animated with the music. I tried, in the early days I tried not to move because when I was nobody and playing, I remember playing somewhere in Manchester and two girls at the front of the stage were laughing at the way I was moving about, and so I thought I've got to try and stop doing stuff. I can't.
No, you shouldn't.
It takes over.
10 years after.